when my son David looked me in the eyes and said, "Mom, maybe it's time you found your own place," I felt something inside me break. Not shatter, not explode, just quietly break, like a glass falling on carpet. I had been living in his house for 3 years. The house I helped him buy. The house where I cooked his favorite meals every Sunday. The house where I babysat his children while he and Sarah went on their date nights. I remember standing there in the kitchen, holding a dish towel in my hands. The same kitchen where I had taught him to make pancakes when he was 8 years old. The same kitchen where we had planned his wedding just 5 years ago. Now, at 62, I was being asked to leave. Not by a stranger. Not by an enemy. By my own son. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just nodded and said, "Of course, honey. Whatever you think is best." But inside, I felt like I was drowning in my own home, or what I thought was my home. You see, I never expected to be living with my adult son. Life has a way of changing your plans when you least expect it. 3 years ago, I was living in my own apartment, working part-time at the local library, enjoying my independence. Then my husband of 35 years, David's father, passed away suddenly from a heart attack. The grief was overwhelming, but the financial reality was even harder to face. Robert had handled all our finances. I discovered after his funeral that we had more debt than I realized. The life insurance barely covered the funeral costs and some of the bills. I had to sell our house just to stay afloat. At 59, I found myself homeless, heartbroken, and completely lost. That's when David stepped in. My wonderful son, my only child, opened his doors to me. "Mom, your family," he said. "This is your home now." Sarah, his wife, had smiled and agreed. "Of course, Mom," she said, using the name she had called me since their wedding day. "We have plenty of space," and they did. Their 4-bedroom house in the suburbs had a guest room that became mine. I tried to make myself useful. I helped with the children, Emma, who was 5, and little Michael, who was 3. I cooked dinners. I did laundry. I cleaned. I wanted to earn my place there, to show them I wasn't just a burden. For the first year, everything seemed perfect. David would come home from his job at the accounting firm, and I would have dinner ready. Sarah worked part-time as a nurse, and I was always available to watch the kids when she picked up extra shifts. We were like one big happy family, or so I thought. Let me tell you about my son David. He was always a gentle soul, even as a child. When he was 7, he once brought home a wounded bird and begged me to help it heal. We spent 2 weeks nursing that little sparrow back to health. When it finally flew away, David cried. Not because he was sad, but because he was happy the bird was free. That's the David I raised. Compassionate, caring, always thinking of others. He met Sarah in college, and I knew immediately she was special. She was studying nursing, volunteering at the local hospital on weekends. She had this bright smile and a way of making everyone feel comfortable. When David brought her home for the first time, I thought, this is the woman who will make my son happy. Their wedding was beautiful. Small, intimate, just family and close friends. I remember dancing with David at the reception, tears in my eyes, telling him how proud I was of the man he had become. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Thank you for everything." After Robert died, David didn't hesitate to invite me into his home. "We're family," he kept saying. "We take care of each other." Sarah was equally welcoming. She helped me set up my room, even letting me bring some of my furniture from the old house. "Make yourself at home," she said. "This is your space now." The children adored having Grandma around. Emma would run to me every day after school, eager to tell me about her day. Little Michael would curl up in my lap while I read him stories. I felt needed, wanted, loved. After months of grief and loneliness following Robert's death, I finally felt like I belonged somewhere again. I established routines that worked for everyone. I would wake up early and make coffee for David and Sarah. I'd help get the children ready for school and daycare. During the day, while David was at work and Sarah was at the hospital, I'd clean the house, do laundry, and prep dinner. When the children came home, I'd help with homework and keep them entertained until their parents returned. Evenings were family time. We'd eat dinner together, share stories about our days. David would help the children with their homework while Sarah and I cleaned up. Then we'd all watch a movie or play board games. It felt natural, comfortable. I thought I had found my place in this new chapter of my life. Sarah and I grew close during those first months. We'd drink tea together in the mornings after David left for work. She'd tell me about her patients at the hospital, and I'd share stories about David's childhood. We'd laugh together while folding laundry. I felt like I had gained not just a daughter-in-law, but a true daughter. I never had a close relationship with my own mother, Sarah confided in me one afternoon. She was always so critical, so cold. "You're everything I wished she could have been." Those words meant the world to me. I thought we had built something special, something that would last. I was careful not to overstep boundaries. I always asked before making plans with the children. I consulted Sarah about meals, making sure to cook things the family enjoyed. I kept my personal belongings in my room and common areas tidy. I wanted to be the perfect house guest, the helpful mother-in-law, the loving grandmother. For holidays, I contributed financially when I could and always helped with cooking and decorating. Christmas morning was magical that first year, watching Emma and Michael tear open presents while David and Sarah sipped coffee on the couch. I felt grateful to be part of such a loving family moment. But looking back now, I wonder if I was seeing what I wanted to see rather than what was really happening. Maybe the cracks were already forming, and I was too desperate to belong to notice them. The first sign that something was changing came about 18 months after I moved in. It was subtle, so subtle that I almost missed it. Sarah started spending more time in her bedroom after dinner. She said she was tired from long shifts at the hospital, and I believed her. Nursing is demanding work, after all. But then I noticed she would close the bedroom door when she and David talked at night. Before, they would chat openly in the living room or kitchen while I helped the children with homework. Now, their conversations happened behind closed doors, in hushed voices I couldn't hear. I told myself I was being paranoid. Every couple needs privacy. Every marriage has moments that don't include the mother-in-law. I tried to push the uneasy feeling away and focus on being helpful. The children were still happy to have me around. Emma had started second grade and was learning to read chapter books. She would curl up next to me on the couch every evening, sounding out difficult words while I encouraged her. Michael was potty training, and I was the one who celebrated his small victories throughout the day. "Grandma, look!" Michael would shout when he successfully used the big boy potty. I would clap and cheer, and he would beam with pride. These moments filled my heart. I felt essential to their daily lives, important in their development. David still seemed happy to have me there. He would hug me goodnight and thank me for dinner. "Mom, I don't know what we'd do without you," he said one evening after I had stayed late with Michael when he had a fever. Sarah had been working a double shift, and David had an important meeting he couldn't miss. But even David started to change, slowly and almost imperceptibly. He stopped lingering in the kitchen after dinner to chat with me. He used to tell me about his day at work, about difficult clients or office politics. Now he would eat quickly and excuse himself to help with bedtime routines or catch up on work. I started to feel like I was walking on eggshells, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. I became hyper-aware of my presence in their space. Did I talk too much at dinner? Was I being too helpful? Was I accidentally intruding on family moments? One evening, I overheard Sarah on the phone with someone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but her voice carried from the bedroom down the hallway. It's been over a year now," she was saying. "I thought it would be temporary." My heart started racing. Were they talking about me? I strained to hear more, but David called out to ask if I had seen Michael's favorite book. By the time I helped him find it, Sarah's phone call was over. That night, I lay in bed replaying every interaction from the past few weeks. Had I overstepped somewhere? Had I said something wrong? I couldn't think of any specific incident, but the feeling that something was shifting became impossible to ignore. The next morning, I was extra careful to be helpful, but not intrusive. I made coffee and breakfast but didn't linger to chat. I offered to take the children to school but didn't insist when Sarah said she would do it herself. I cleaned the house but made sure to stay out of their bedroom and private spaces. Despite my efforts, the atmosphere in the house felt different. Conversations became more polite, less natural. Sarah would thank me for dinner but wouldn't stay to chat afterward. David would ask about my day but seemed distracted when I answered. I started spending more time in my room, reading or watching television with headphones so I wouldn't disturb anyone. I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to prove that I could live there without causing problems. But the more I tried to make myself invisible, the more isolated I felt. I began to wonder if moving in had been a mistake. Maybe I should have found a way to manage on my own after Robert died. Maybe I had put too much pressure on my son and his family. One Saturday morning, I woke up to unusual silence in the house. Normally, weekends were filled with the sounds of children playing, cartoons on television, families making breakfast together. But this morning was quiet. I got dressed and went to the kitchen, expecting to find everyone gathered for our usual weekend pancake breakfast. Instead, I found a note on the counter. Gone to the park. Back later. Help yourself to coffee. Sarah. They had gone out as a family without me. Without even asking if I wanted to come along. I stood there holding the note, feeling like a stranger in what I had thought was my home. I made myself coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking out at the backyard, where I had helped David build a swing set for the children just 6 months earlier. We had spent a whole Saturday working together, laughing when I couldn't figure out the instructions, celebrating when we finally got it right. The kids are going to love this, David had said, wrapping his arm around my shoulders as we admired our work. Thanks for helping me, Mom. I couldn't have done it without you. Now, sitting alone in their empty house, that memory felt like it belonged to someone else's life. When they returned from the park, the children ran to me with excitement. Grandma? We saw ducks, Emma announced. And Michael fed them bread. That sounds wonderful, I said, forcing a smile. Did you have fun? Sarah and David seemed cheerful, but didn't offer any details about their outing. They didn't explain why they hadn't invited me or even mentioned they were planning to go. It was as if they had simply forgotten I existed. That evening, after the children were in bed, I sat in the living room reading while David and Sarah watched television. But instead of the comfortable family atmosphere we used to share, I felt like an intruder. They sat close together on the couch, occasionally whispering to each other, while I occupied the armchair across the room. I excused myself early that night, claiming I was tired. As I lay in bed, I could hear them talking in low voices in the living room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was serious. I knew somehow that they were talking about me. As winter turned to spring, the distance between us grew wider. It wasn't anything dramatic or obvious. There were no arguments, no harsh words. Instead, it was a gradual pulling away, like watching someone slowly disappear into fog. Sarah stopped asking for my help with the children's school events. She had always appreciated an extra pair of hands for class parties or field trip chaperoning. "You're so good with kids," she used to say. "The teachers love having you there." But now she would mention these events in passing, almost as an afterthought, making it clear that my help wasn't needed. David began working later hours. Or at least that's what he told me. "Big project at the office," he would say, coming home after the children were already in bed. "Sorry I missed dinner again, Mom." But something about these late nights felt different. Forced, maybe, like he was avoiding being home. The children were still affectionate with me, still excited to share their daily adventures. But even their routines with me started to change. Sarah began picking them up from school more often, saying she had adjusted her work schedule. She would take them directly to activities or play dates, bringing them home just before dinner. "We don't want to tire you out, Mom," David said when I mentioned that I missed spending afternoons with Emma and Michael. "You do so much for us already." But I wasn't tired. I was energized by their company. Those afternoon hours with my grandchildren had been the highlight of my days. Without them, I found myself with long stretches of empty time, wandering around a house that no longer felt like home. I started taking walks in the neighborhood, partly for exercise but mostly to get out of the house. I didn't want to be sitting there like a piece of furniture when they came home from their busy lives. During these walks, I would see other families in their yards, children playing while parents watched from porches. I wondered if any of those parents lived with their adult children, and if so, whether they felt as displaced as I did. One afternoon, I ran into Mrs. Henderson, an elderly neighbor I had met a few times. She was working in her garden, and we struck up a conversation about the flowers she was planting. "You're David's mother, aren't you?" she asked. "Living with them in the big house on the corner?" "Yes," I replied. "I've been staying there for a while now." She paused in her planting and looked at me with kind but knowing eyes. "That's nice for you, having family close by, though I imagine it takes some adjusting for everyone." Something in her tone suggested she understood more than she was saying. Maybe she had observed things from her front porch that I couldn't see from inside the house. "It does take adjusting," I agreed carefully. "I lived with my daughter and her family for 6 months after my husband passed," Mrs. Henderson continued. "Thought it would be temporary, but 6 months turned into a year. Everyone meant well, but—" She trailed off, returning to her flowers. "But what?" I prompted gently. "But sometimes the kindest thing you can do for the people you love is give them space to live their own lives, even when it's the last thing you want to do." Her words stayed with me long after our conversation ended. Was that what was happening? Were David and Sarah trying to live their own lives while feeling obligated to care for me? The thought was both heartbreaking and clarifying. That evening, I paid closer attention to the family dynamics. During dinner, David and Sarah talked about their days, but their conversation felt performative, like they were putting on a show of normalcy for my benefit. The children chattered happily, but I noticed that Sarah redirected their attention away from me when they tried to include me in their stories. "Tell Daddy about your math test," Sarah would say when Emma started to tell me about school. "Daddy wants to hear about how hard you studied." After dinner, I offered to help with dishes, as I always did. "Oh, that's okay, Mom," Sarah said quickly. "David and I can handle it." "Why don't you relax?" But I didn't want to relax. I wanted to be part of the family routine. I wanted to feel useful, needed, connected. Instead, I felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. I went to my room and called my sister Margaret, who lived 3 states away. We had always been close, and she had been supportive during my transition after Robert's death. "How are things with David and Sarah?" she asked after we caught up on general news. I found myself hesitating, unsure how to explain the subtle changes I was experiencing. "It's different than it used to be," I said finally. "Different how?" "I feel like I'm in the way. Not dramatically, just like they're being polite to me instead of treating me like family." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "How long has it been now?" "Since you moved in?" 2.5 years. "That's a long time for 3 generations to share one house," she said gently. "Maybe they need some space." "Maybe you do too. But where would I go? I can't afford my own place yet. And the children? The children will always be your grandchildren, no matter where you live. And maybe your relationship with David and Sarah will be better if you're not all living on top of each other." After we hung up, I sat in my room thinking about Margaret's words. Was she right? Would everyone be happier if I found my own place? But the financial reality hadn't changed. My part-time work at the library barely covered my personal expenses. I had been saving what I could, but it wasn't nearly enough for a security deposit and first month's rent on an apartment. The next morning, I woke up determined to have an honest conversation with David. But when I went to the kitchen, I found Sarah there alone, packing lunch boxes for the children. "Morning," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "David left early for work. Big presentation today." "Sarah," I said, taking a deep breath. "Can we talk?" She glanced at the clock. "I need to get the kids to school, but sure." "What's on your mind?" "I've been feeling like maybe I'm in the way here. Like you and David might need more space." Something flickered across her face. Relief, maybe? But she quickly composed herself. "Oh, Mom, don't be silly. Your family. This is your home." But her response felt automatic, rehearsed. And she had called me Mom in a way that sounded more polite than affectionate. "I just want you to know that if you ever need me to make other arrangements, I understand," I continued. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Sarah said firmly, but she was already moving toward the stairs to get the children. "We need to hurry, or we'll be late for school." The conversation was over before it had really begun, leaving me with more questions than answers. The conversation that changed everything happened on a Tuesday evening in early April. I remember the date because it was Emma's school spring concert the next day, and I had been looking forward to watching her perform. She had been practicing her song for weeks, singing it softly while I helped her with homework. "Are you coming to my concert tomorrow, Grandma?" she had asked that morning. "Of course, sweetheart. I wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied. But that Tuesday evening, as I was setting the table for dinner, Sarah mentioned the concert in passing to David. "Don't forget Emma's concert tomorrow at 7. I told them we'd be there early to help set up chairs." "We'll be there," David confirmed. Then he looked at me. "Mom, you don't mind staying with Michael tomorrow night, do you? It's a school night, and the concert might run late for him." I felt like I had been slapped. "Stay with Michael?" "But Emma asked me to come. She's been practicing her song for me." Sarah and David exchanged a look that I pretended not to notice. "It's just that there are limited seats," Sarah explained. "And Michael gets cranky when he's up past his bedtime. It would really help us out if you could watch him." "But surely there's room for one more person," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's Emma's first school concert. I've been helping her practice." "Mom," David said gently, "it would really be better if you stayed home with Michael. We'll record the concert for you to watch later. Record it. Like I was some distant relative who couldn't be bothered to attend in person. Like my presence wasn't important enough to warrant an actual seat at my granddaughter's concert." I nodded and forced a smile. "Of course. Michael and I will have our own fun evening." But inside, I was crumbling. This wasn't about seating or late bedtimes. This was about being excluded from family moments, about being relegated to the role of babysitter rather than grandmother. The next evening, I watched Emma get ready for her concert. She looked beautiful in her white dress with a yellow ribbon in her hair. "I wish you could come, Grandma," she said as Sarah brushed her hair. "I wish I could too, sweetheart. But I'll be thinking of you, and Mommy and Daddy will record it so we can watch it together tomorrow." After they left, Michael and I made popcorn and watched cartoons. He was perfectly well behaved, not cranky at all. We could have easily taken him to the concert. But that wasn't really the point, was it? When David and Sarah returned home, they were full of excitement about Emma's performance. "She was amazing," Sarah gushed. "She sang so clearly, and she remembered all the words." They showed me the video on David's phone, and I watched my granddaughter sing the song she had practiced with me. She looked around the audience during her performance, and I wondered if she was looking for me. "It's wonderful," I said, handing the phone back. "I'm so proud of her." But something had shifted that night. I realized that I was no longer considered an essential part of the family unit. I was helpful when needed, but not included when it mattered. The weeks that followed brought more of the same subtle exclusions. Family movie nights happened after I had gone to bed. Weekend activities were planned without consulting me. Conversations about summer vacation plans took place in whispered discussions that stopped when I entered the room. I started to feel like a ghost in their house. Present but not really seen, there but not really included. The isolation was becoming unbearable. One evening in late April, I was in the kitchen cleaning up after dinner when I overheard David and Sarah talking in the living room. They thought I was upstairs, but I had come back down for a glass of water. "We need to talk to her," Sarah was saying. "This can't go on forever." "I know," David replied. "But how do I tell my own mother that I want her to move out? Especially when she doesn't have anywhere else to go." "She's been here for 3 years, David. 3 years. We've been patient, but the kids are getting older, and we need our space back. We need our privacy back. She helped us so much when Dad died. She's been good to the kids. I feel terrible even thinking about asking her to leave." "I know she's been helpful," Sarah said, and I could hear the frustration in her voice. "But David, We're not the same family we were 3 years ago. The kids don't need constant supervision anymore. I'm working fewer hours now. We don't need a live-in babysitter. A live-in babysitter. That's how she saw me. Not as a grandmother, not as family, but as hired help that was no longer needed. Maybe we could help her find a small apartment, David suggested. Give her some financial assistance until she gets on her feet. That's generous, Sarah replied. But David, we also need to think about our own financial future. Emma will be in middle school soon, and Michael will start school full-time. We need to start saving for their activities, for college. We can't support your mother indefinitely. I stood in the kitchen, holding my empty water glass, feeling like an intruder in a conversation about my own life. They were talking about me like I was a problem to be solved, a burden to be managed. I went upstairs to my room and sat on the bed, trying to process what I had heard. They wanted me gone, not because I had done anything wrong, but because my presence had become inconvenient. The children they said needed me actually didn't need me at all. The next morning, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. I couldn't continue living somewhere I wasn't wanted, no matter how afraid I was of the alternative. I had to have dignity, self-respect. I had to save what was left of my relationship with my son before the resentment grew any deeper. I made breakfast as usual, helped get the children ready for school, and waited for David to come home from work. Sarah was working a late shift that day, so it would be just the two of us. When David walked through the door, I was waiting in the living room. "Hi, Mom," he said, kissing my cheek. "How was your day?" "David," I said, "we need to talk." He must have heard something in my voice because he sat down immediately, giving me his full attention. "I think it's time for me to find my own place," I said. Relief flooded his face before he could hide it. And that reaction told me everything I needed to know. "Mom, you don't have to," he started. "Yes, I do," I interrupted gently. "You and Sarah need your space. The children are older now. You don't need me here anymore." He was quiet for a long moment, and I could see him struggling with guilt and relief in equal measure. "Where would you go?" he asked finally. "I'm not sure yet, but I'll figure it out. I always have." That's when he said the words that broke my heart completely. "Mom, maybe it's time you found your own place." Even though I had brought up the topic, hearing him agree so readily, so easily, felt like a rejection of everything I thought we had built together over the past 3 years. The weeks that followed our conversation were strange and awkward. David and Sarah tried to be extra kind, as if their sudden helpfulness could make up for years of growing resentment. Sarah offered to help me look for apartments online. David suggested I take my time, that there was no rush. But I could feel their eagerness beneath the politeness, their desire to reclaim their space. I started spending my days apartment hunting, taking buses to different neighborhoods, walking through small studios and one-bedroom places that I could barely afford. Most of them were depressing. Dark, cramped spaces in buildings that smelled like old cooking and disappointment. But they were independent. They were mine. The children sensed something was changing, even though no one had officially told them I was moving out. Emma started clinging to me more, asking if I was going somewhere. "Are you leaving us, Grandma?" she asked one evening while I was reading her a bedtime story. "I might find my own apartment soon," I told her gently, "but I'll still be your grandma. I'll still see you all the time." "But why can't you just stay here?" Michael asked from his bed across the room. "This is your home." How do you explain to a 4-year-old that sometimes love isn't enough? That sometimes being family means knowing when to step away? Sometimes grown-ups need their own space, I said. But love doesn't change just because where we live changes. I hoped that was true. The apartment I finally chose was small but clean, on the second floor of a building about 20 minutes away by bus. It had one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with a window that faced east, letting in morning sunlight. The rent would take most of my income from the library, but I had saved enough for the deposit and first month's rent. When I told David and Sarah about the apartment, they both seemed relieved and guilty at the same time. "Are you sure you'll be comfortable there?" Sarah asked. though I could tell she was already mentally redecorating my current room. "It'll be perfect," I said. "Just right for me." David insisted on helping me move, and Sarah offered to watch the children during the process. "We want to make this as easy as possible for you, Mom," David said. The day of the move, I packed my belongings, fewer than I had realized after 3 years of trying to be unobtrusive. Most of my furniture had been sold or given away when I moved in with them. I had accumulated very little, as if some part of me had always known this arrangement was temporary. Emma and Michael helped me pack small items, treating it like a game even though I could see the confusion in their eyes. They didn't understand why Grandma was leaving, and I wasn't sure I understood it completely either. "Can we come visit your new house?" Emma asked as we wrapped photo frames in newspaper. "Of course, sweetheart. Anytime your parents say it's okay." David loaded the boxes into his car while I did a final walkthrough of the room that had been mine. I had tried so hard to make it feel like home without making it too much my own. Now it looked impersonal again, ready for whatever purpose it would serve next. The drive to my new apartment was quiet. David helped me carry everything upstairs, and we spent the afternoon arranging furniture and unpacking boxes. He seemed determined to make sure I was settled, as if his attention now could make up for the months of growing distance. "This is nice, Mom," he said, looking around the small living room. "Really nice. And you're so close to the bus line. You'll be able to get in where you need to go." "It's perfect," I agreed, though the space felt enormous and empty after years of living in a house full of family noise. After David left, I sat in my new living room and cried. Not because I was sad to be gone, exactly, but because of everything that had led to this moment. I cried for the loss of the family dynamic I had thought we were building. I cried for the loneliness that was already settling into my bones. I cried for the realization that love and welcome are not always the same thing. But as the tears stopped, I felt something else. Relief. For the first time in months, I could breathe without worrying about taking up too much space. I could watch television at whatever volume I wanted. I could eat dinner at 6 o'clock or 9 o'clock without disrupting anyone else's schedule. I could be myself without constantly monitoring whether I was being too much. The first few weeks in my new apartment were challenging. The silence was overwhelming after years of living with children's laughter and family conversations. I had to learn new routines, new ways of filling my days, but I also rediscovered parts of myself that had gotten lost in my eagerness to be useful to David's family. I started taking art classes at the community center. I had always enjoyed drawing, but had put it aside during my busy years of raising David and then caring for Robert. Now I had time to explore my creativity again. The classes were filled with other older adults, many of them dealing with their own life transitions. We formed friendships based on shared experiences rather than family obligations. I also volunteered more hours at the library, and my supervisor offered me additional responsibilities. "You're so reliable," she said, "and the patrons love you. Would you be interested in running our new senior literacy program?" For the first time in years, I felt valued for my skills and personality rather than just my willingness to help with household tasks. David and the family visited my apartment twice in the first month. The visits were pleasant but awkward, as if we were all trying to figure out our new relationship dynamic. The children were fascinated by my small space, treating it like a dollhouse. But I could see David and Sarah checking their watches, eager to return to their regular family routines. "We should do this more often," David said at the end of the second visit, but we all knew that wasn't likely to happen. As spring turned to summer, the visits became less frequent. David would call once a week, and we would have brief, pleasant conversations about the weather and work. Sarah sent photos of the children occasionally, but the daily intimacy of shared family life was gone. At first, this distance felt like another loss. But gradually, I began to appreciate the way our relationship was evolving. When David did call, we had real conversations about his work, his goals, his concerns. Without the daily friction of shared living space, we could focus on the parts of our relationship that had always been strong. 6 months after moving into my own apartment, I received an unexpected phone call from Sarah. She sounded different, less guarded, more genuine than she had in our final months of living together. "Hi, Mom," she said, and this time the title sounded natural, affectionate. "I was wondering if you'd like to come for dinner this Sunday. The kids have been asking for you." "I'd love that," I replied, surprised by how much I genuinely meant it. Sunday dinner at David and Sarah's house felt like visiting dear friends, rather than trying to fit into a family structure that no longer worked. The children were excited to see me, showing me school projects and telling me about summer camp. David seemed more relaxed than he had in months, and Sarah was warm and inclusive in a way that felt authentic. "How's your apartment?" Sarah asked as we cleaned up after dinner. "Are you settling in well?" "It's wonderful," I said, and I realized I truly meant it. It's exactly the right size for me, and I love being close to the community center and the library. "I'm so glad," she said, and I could tell she was. I was worried. I felt terrible about everything, about how things ended up. We talked openly for the first time in years. Sarah admitted that she had felt overwhelmed by having 3 generations in one house, that she had struggled with feeling like a guest in her own home sometimes. I shared how isolated I had begun to feel, how I had sensed their growing need for privacy. "I think we all tried so hard to make it work that we didn't talk about how it was actually working," Sarah reflected. "We were all being polite instead of being honest." David joined our conversation, and for the first time, we talked about the past 3 years with complete honesty. He admitted that he had felt torn between his loyalty to me and his responsibility to his immediate family. I acknowledged that I had stayed longer than was probably healthy for any of us. "I felt like I was failing you if I asked you to leave," David said. "Like I was abandoning you the way I thought you might feel abandoned when Dad died." "But you didn't abandon me," I assured him. "You gave me a safe place to land when I needed it most. You helped me get back on my feet. That's not abandonment. That's love." As summer progressed, I found a rhythm that worked for all of us. I would visit every other Sunday for dinner, and occasionally David would bring the children to my apartment for afternoon visits. These interactions felt natural and enjoyable because they were chosen rather than obligated. Emma and Michael loved having a grandmother with her own special place. They would help me bake cookies in my tiny kitchen and sleep over occasionally, turning my living room into a fort with blankets and pillows. These visits were precious because they were intentional, planned, anticipated. I also began dating someone I met in my art class. His name was Frank, and he was a widower who had moved to our city to be closer to his daughter's family. Like me, he had learned the importance of maintaining independence while still being part of his children's lives. "I love my daughter and her family deeply," Frank told me over coffee one afternoon. "But I've learned that loving them sometimes means giving them space to love me back on their own terms." Frank and I took things slowly, building a friendship based on shared interests and mutual respect for each other's independence. It was refreshing to have adult companionship that wasn't based on family obligation or household necessity. When I introduced Frank to David and Sarah, they were genuinely happy for me. "It's so good to see you building your own life, Mom," David said. "You seem really happy." And I was happy. Not in the way I had expected my post-Robert life to unfold, but in a way that felt authentic and sustainable. The holidays that first year were different but wonderful. Instead of being the live-in grandmother, helping with preparations, I was the invited guest bringing homemade cookies and thoughtful gifts. Christmas morning felt special because I was choosing to be there, and they were choosing to include me. Emma performed in another school concert that spring, and this time I was invited as an honored guest rather than relegated to babysitting duty. Watching her sing from the audience, surrounded by other proud family members, felt like a celebration of how far we had all come. As my first year of independent living came to an end, I reflected on everything I had learned. Moving out of David's house hadn't been a rejection, it had been a rebalancing. It had allowed all of us to return to relationships based on love and choice, rather than duty and proximity. I learned that being a good mother to an adult child sometimes means stepping back. That being a good grandmother doesn't require constant presence, but rather intentional engagement. That being a good family member means understanding when your role needs to evolve. My relationship with Margaret, my sister, also deepened during this time. She visited me in my apartment several times, and we talked honestly about the challenges of aging, of maintaining dignity and independence while still accepting help when needed. "You did the right thing," Margaret told me during one of her visits. "It was brave to leave when you did. A lot of people would have stayed and let the resentment build until relationships were damaged beyond repair." I also reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with during my years of grief and transition. Having my own space again meant I could host small gatherings, invite people over for tea, build social connections beyond my family relationships. My work at the library expanded into coordinating community programs for seniors. I discovered that my experience, losing a spouse, living with adult children, finding independent housing, was more common than I had realized. Many people my age were navigating similar transitions, and I was able to help them find resources and support. "You have such a gift for listening," my supervisor told me. "People trust you because they can tell you understand what they're going through." This work gave me a sense of purpose that went beyond family relationships. I was contributing to my community, using my experiences to help others, building an identity that was uniquely mine. Now, 2 years after that difficult conversation with David, I can see how necessary it was for all of us. David and Sarah have grown stronger as a couple, more confident as parents. They've made their house truly their own, decorating and organizing it to reflect their family's personality without worrying about accommodating an extra adult. The children have thrived in having their home back to its nuclear family structure, while still maintaining a close relationship with their grandmother. Emma, now 9, tells me proudly about her independence, how she helps make family decisions and takes responsibility for her younger brother. Michael, at 6, has developed his own interests and friendships without feeling like he needs to entertain Grandma every afternoon. My relationship with David has returned to something that feels healthy and sustainable. We talk regularly, share genuine interest in each other's lives, and enjoy each other's company without the underlying tension that had developed during our years of shared living space. Sarah and I have built a friendship that feels real rather than obligatory. She asks my advice sometimes, shares funny stories about the children, and includes me in family celebrations in ways that feel natural rather than dutiful. I've learned that love doesn't require proximity. That family relationships can be strong and meaningful even when family members don't live together. That sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people you love is give them the space to miss you. Living independently again has reminded me of who I am beyond my roles as wife, mother, and grandmother. I'm an artist, a community volunteer, a friend, a woman building a new chapter of her life with intention and hope. When people ask me if I regret moving in with David's family after Robert died, I always say no. Those 3 years served their purpose. They gave me a safe harbor during the storm of grief and financial crisis. They allowed me to be close to my grandchildren during their early years. They showed me that my son was willing to sacrifice for me when I needed help. But I also don't regret leaving when I did. Staying longer would have damaged relationships that are precious to me. It would have built resentment that might have taken years to overcome. Sometimes love means knowing when to hold on, and sometimes it means knowing when to let go. The wisdom is in understanding the difference. I think about Mrs. Henderson, my neighbor who shared her own story of living with adult children. She was right when she said that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people you love is give them space to live their own lives. But I would add this. Giving them that space also gives you the opportunity to live your own life more fully. My apartment is small, but it's mine. My days are quieter, but they're filled with purpose. My family relationships are less frequent, but they're more genuine. I'm not the same woman who moved in with David 3 years ago, desperate and displaced. I'm someone who chose to build a new life, who found the courage to start over at 65, who learned that home is not just where family is, but where you can be authentically yourself. When Emma asks me now if I'm happy living alone, I tell her the truth. I'm not living alone. I'm living independently. There's a difference. I'm surrounded by friends, involved in my community, building relationships based on shared interests and mutual respect. I have a family that loves me enough to let me be myself, and I love them enough to let them be themselves. That's not loneliness. That's freedom. And sometimes, freedom is the greatest gift you can give yourself and the people you love. The day my son asked me to find another place to live was the day our family began to heal. Though none of us understood it at the time, it was the beginning of relationships based on choice rather than obligation, on love rather than duty, on mutual respect rather than mutual convenience. And that, I've learned, is the strongest foundation any family can have. I never thought the happiest day of my son Michael's life would become the worst day of mine. For 28 years, it had been just the two of us. His father left when Michael was only 3, and I worked double shifts at the diner to give him everything he needed. We were a team. When Michael met Sarah, I was genuinely happy for him. She seemed sweet, ambitious, and she made him smile in a way I hadn't seen since he was a little boy. I welcomed her into our small family with open arms, even though I noticed how she would sometimes go quiet when Michael and I shared our inside jokes or talked about our old traditions. The wedding was beautiful. I had saved for 2 years to help pay for it, even taking on weekend catering jobs to contribute what I could. I wore my best dress, the navy blue one I'd bought for Michael's college graduation, and I cried happy tears as I watched my son promise his life to the woman he loved. But 3 days after the wedding, everything changed. Michael came to visit me alone, which had become unusual since Sarah entered his life. I made his favorite coffee and sat across from him at our old kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped him with homework for years. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, avoiding my eyes. I felt a chill run down my spine. Those words never led anywhere good. "Sarah and I have been discussing our future and—" He paused, running his hands through his hair the way he used to when he was nervous about a test. "We think it might be better if you gave us some space to build our marriage." I didn't understand. "Space? Michael, I hardly see you as it is." "That's not what I mean, Mom." His voice was firmer now, like he was reading from a script. "Sarah feels like you're too involved in our lives. The constant calls, the surprise visits, the way you still treat me like I'm your little boy." Each word felt like a slap. "I call you twice a week and I only visit when you invite me." "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is." He finally looked at me, and I saw a stranger in my son's eyes. "Sarah says that for our marriage to work, I need to establish boundaries with you. She feels like you're a burden on our relationship." A burden. The word hung in the air like poison. "A burden?" I whispered. "Michael, I raised you alone. I sacrificed everything for you. I worked myself to the bone so you could have a good life, go to college, become the man you are today. And I'm grateful for that, Mom. I really am. But that was your choice. I didn't ask you to sacrifice your life for me, and now I need to live mine." I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped beating. This was my son, my baby boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who called me his best girl until he was 15, who promised me at his high school graduation that I would always be the most important woman in his life. "So what are you saying, Michael? That I can't be part of your life anymore?" "I'm saying we need space. Maybe we can talk once a month instead of every few days. And the visits, maybe just holidays." I stood up from the table, my legs shaking. "Your wife has been in your life for 2 years, Michael. I've been in your life for 28. And you're choosing her comfort over my heart. Mom, please." "No." I held up my hand. "If I'm such a burden, then don't let me burden you anymore. You have my number if you ever remember that you once had a mother who loved you more than her own life." He left without saying goodbye. That was 6 months ago. I've kept my word. I haven't called, haven't texted, haven't shown up at his door. I've waited for him to reach out, to realize that love isn't a burden, it's a gift. But my phone stays silent. Last week, I ran into his old friend Jake at the grocery store. He told me that Michael seems different now, quieter, more distant, even with his friends. Jake said he asked Michael about me, and Michael just changed the subject. I wonder if Sarah got what she wanted, a husband free from the burden of a loving mother. I wonder if Michael is happy in his new life, or if sometimes, late at night, he remembers the woman who used to read him bedtime stories and make him chicken soup when he was sick. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just heartbroken, because I know that one day when life gets hard, and it will, he'll need his mother. And I'll be here, just like I always have been. But something between us will be broken forever. Something that his wife's words and his choices shattered on that terrible day when my son called his mother a burden. I just hope that when that day comes, it won't be too late for us to find our way back to each other.